Kurt Doolittle.
Good morning, boss. How are you?
Wonderful.
I guessed the jacket color right today.
Oh, a good man.
I like the tie.
Thank you, sir. I want you to know I spent a great deal of time studying your video on calculation. And it was so information dense that I may have to do it again in 0.75 speed. It's like this caused me to come to a conclusion that you are actually an AI. you are a bot. I'm only here as a bot myself to try to make you appear to be more human.
Back when I first started getting on Facebook, it was frequent. I was frequently called an AI.
It's like I'm studying. I'm like, okay, I can mostly follow this, and I slowed it down some. I'm like, wow. And I'm like, I feel for the people trying to keep up from a cold start.
Let's remember, it's informationally dense for me too.
I know.
Math is informationally dense, right? Right.
Right.
It's the same problem, right?
That's right.
As you're trying to say something extremely precisely with the least amount of potential misinterpretation, right? You're basically trying to speak in measurements, and you're trying to do it in an order. And it's just I go back and I'm like, wow, did I write that? That was pretty.
It was good. That was very good. I do have another issue to report that I thought was interesting. I got a text yesterday from my friend, the socialist doctor next door, right? And he specifically mentioned the term natural law as being potential dog whistle material. I'm like, that's interesting that has bled into this consciousness there, right? I told him that I thought he was mistaken, and I would be happy to discuss it with him at length, but certainly not by text.
Ask him if physics and what does he do for a living?
He's a doctor.
Ask him if biological science is a dog whistle.
It must be.
Same fucking thing.
I go like this, man. I don't talk to people that do not appear to be fully cognizant for any purpose other than to plumb the depths of ignorance and try to understand what is occurring beneath the waves.
But here's a problem. This is something I said yesterday, and I have to work at saying it even better, is that a conservative wants to be left alone. We're happy to be responsible. We're happy to be competent. We're happy to sort to our place in the hierarchy as long as we can succeed and provide value there. Because by doing our duty, we respect each other. I respect the garbage man. I respect the guy who takes my ticket at the ticket counter. I respect the waitress. The people I question about respecting are my peers, because I have to hold them to a higher standard. Right? So I was saying to the guys, look, guys, you may want to be left alone, but if you're saying that, but by failing to take responsibility for rule, you're doing the same thing as the other people are by failing to take responsibility for self-management. So you can't say you guys are not paying your way, despite the fact that you're incompetent for rule. If we're going to say is we're not going to pay our way, which requires governing, ruling. Because the answer is, if you don't have the Plato, if you refuse to spend the time and effort to rule, you'll be ruled by the people who aren't competent to rule, which is the left, right? So this is the issue, is that this is my complaint about the right, is that they keep saying, well, isn't somebody else responsible for this?
It's deferral of responsibility, yes.
Well, I mean, in a hierarchical mind, of course, the top of the hierarchy should be responsible for this. They're not realizing they're the top of the hierarchy when it comes to numbers. right? And so the conservatives have to take responsibility for self-rule, if only in self-defense. You may not want to pay the cost of preserving self-rule by preventing those who are parasites from, extracting from you, and then thereby forcing those people to be mindful, accountable, responsible, and competent, despite their terrible desire for to being dependent, and a small portion of those people desire to extract from you to gain the attention and support of the dependents. So, I mean, it's just mommy, daddy, and children. We're daddy, the left is mommy, and the dependents are children. And so if you're not going to be daddy and pay the cost of rule, you're going to get ruled by mommy and the kids, which is what's happening.
Book of Isaiah. You'll be ruled by women and children.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about this word to rule to disambiguate it a little bit, because it's interesting.
Yeah.
Because
Oh,
to
that's
rule-
you did it again.
What?
You brought up a really good question.
Well, it's instrumentation and measurement is the key to rule. It's measurement.
Yeah, take it farther though.
Well, it's like that. It's the decidability. Yeah, how about that? It points to it.
There you go. So rule is to decide, and we decide
Measurement.
by via negativa limits. How does that differ from govern? That's to produce commons. We agree by via positiva, good, and consent. Right? And so this is the difference. This is why I say we conflate everything. Rule is just that. You need, what did you call it? We need instruments by
Instrumentation
instrumentation.
for decidability.
Now, so that's not an opinion,
I know.
right? No. I mean, I'm writing it. I have to write it down.
I see you writing, but I'm not sharing your screen though.
Oh, no, I don't need to.
That's okay.
I want to keep this going. So
No.
to rule is to decide. It's a via negativa.
That's
To
right.
govern is to produce commons. That's a via positiva. And so we're looking to achieve good. Now you can create positivas by consent, right? You can, in other words, the population can create a market we call democracy to produce a commons. You can do it by approve of assent or dissent. In other words, a cabinet of professionals produces a set of collects information and then proposes what they think is right. And you can assent or dissent from the paying that cost, whether it be monetary, physical, behavioral, or cognitive. But and so that's the difference between rule, daddy, and govern, mommy. It's the limit of supply, rule, the unlimited of demand, govern, right? Because that's the reason we need governments, is because that there's an endless supply of wants and a limited supply of resources. So rule is basically saying don't steal because we're limiting you to the consumption of, to limiting you to the expenditures which your productivity can cover, right? And limiting you at least marginally to reciprocity within the limits of proportionality, right? So the limits are there, daddy, paternalism. I used to hate that term. I used to fucking hate it. And now I completely get it and I don't want to. And then
Right? The lefty's got a point.
God damn it. So it's just positive and negative. And so it's the same thing with the, in the economy, we have positive and negative forces, right? We have wants and not wants. We have resource limits and resource capacity, and we calculate that fine. The difference is when we produce consumables, what we call the private sector and the economy, right? The regular, I got to find a word for calling the regular economy and the commons economy. I'll figure out the consumption economy versus the preservation economy. The difference is when you buy something yourself, you have the ability to consume it. When you make a commons, it's not consumable. That's why we need governments to make a thing that you're prohibited from consuming.
Yeah.
I always use a park, as a park or a common, right? Which is where you graze your animals. I always use that as the basic example because it's so easy to understand. But the whole thing is you can't consume it. You can only have rights of usus and fructus, right? But no right of abusus. Or you can't abuse it. Anyway, so govern and rule. How did you start out with such a good question right off the bat?
Just because you mentioned the word rule. And I've been meaning to make a noise about it. And it's like, what is it? It is precisely what you're up to here, which is making these functions possible.
It's funny, we're getting really good feedback from people.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I thought they would find this stuff boring, but they don't. They like it.
So the interesting, there's the conflation that's occurring in my leftist friend's mind with regard to natural law is law of the jungle. He conflates it with law of the jungle, which is, well, I mentioned it.
Oh no, I'm just trying to figure out how he got there.
It is
competition
thinking, right? It's fuzzy-headed thinking.
Oh, well, they view market competition as unfair, right? They're children.
Okay.
And they're not trying to manage scarcity. They're under the pretense that there's enough.
That would be it. That would be the primary delusion.
Right.
That we just have to divide it properly.
Correct. So that's where they live. And, it's like those who can't systematize can't comprehend.
So that's the primary error they make.
Right. It's the violation of scarcity, a violation of they violate all of them. It's the violation of physical law of scarcity, violation of the behavioral law of self-interest, and violation of the behavior and the evolutionary law of kin selection. And so they violate, you can go, it's like all the checklists we give people, we keep giving people, we're just giving you checklists, right? Serialize, and the minute you go down and you don't take an idea in isolation, but you serialize that, all of a sudden you got a system of measurement which disambiguates it, and all of a sudden you get understanding, right? So what word did we just use?
We were on the delusion of plenty.
Yeah, so it's just like what are the four laws of the universe? Logic, right? I should do it this way. The three laws of the universe: the before law, physical; the during law, behavioral; and the after law, evolutionary or consequent. Before, during, and after. And we describe these laws with the fourth set of laws, which is logic.
That's it.
Right. And so if you know what the logics are, the first principles of those logics, and you just use them in operational terms, you can falsify things. But if you go through whenever a liberal says something and you say, which of these four laws is the person violating, it's just really simple.
But
right?
I like the presumption there, which is like, okay, when they open their mouth, what kind of error will fall out?
Well, it's going to fall. I mean, that's their whole purpose, is right. Social construction of a falsehood to get away with something. So it's more like it's like the ignorance of a child. Right? It's just being a child. They have childish minds, right? I mean, liberal has a childish mind. And so I must need more coffee.
It's okay.
So you just go through the four laws. Now, that's the same thing when we go through reciprocity.
Right.
Is it a productive, fully informed, warranted, voluntary transfer, demonstrated interest, free of externality, right? You go through that's, you're like, okay, now you've used those, violated the four laws. Now, how do they violate reciprocity? Now you're making a truth. Now you go down to the truth thing, which is it realism, naturalism, unambiguous, meaning identity, internally consistent, meaning logical, operationally plausible, which is in other words, you can act on it, empirical, which is externally correspondent. Is it a rational choice for an actor? In other words, does it violate self-interest, given the context at hand? Is it reciprocal? In other words, if it's an exchange, is it moral? Is it between two people both making rational choices? Have you determined the limits within the statement you're making? What's the failure point above and below? Have you completely accounted for everything in between it, which is what we call full accounting, which is really 90% of the errors that people make? And then is your claim, have you practiced by doing those things, have you done your due diligence as such that you can claim you're making a truth claim, that it's within your limit? If you're wrong, it's within the limits of your ability to perform restitution, right? I mean, so that's just a checklist. And then you say, well, but you're saying it's reciprocity. How do I know it's reciprocal? Because it's either your personal action, your interpersonal property, your personal property, the common property of the common property. It's informational, institutional, normative, or physical, right? There's only so many checklists. I just did them all.
I don't write them down fast enough.
You don't have to write them down. It's like we say, it's just a poster, right? And you say, well, I mean, when you go to court, what are they trying to decide? They're trying to get the difference between decidability, judgment, and discretion. Why? Because they're trying to determine whether there's guilt, restitution, punishment, and prevention.
We have to go back here because it goes to before, during, and after.
Correct. Go ahead.
That's just so we have decidability is before.
Yep.
Judgment is during.
Yep.
And then punishment is after. No,
that's right.
Prevention.
Well, they're both. Punishment and prevention is just who are you affecting.
Okay.
You're trying to, technically, punishment is to cause you to be prevent, and then prevention is who's going to imitate this.
Right.
Right. And so that's just that. So that's just the scale. I mean, they're both punishment and prevention. Okay. So yeah, you're right. It's before, during, and after, which is the other pattern we're going to see in everything, right? I'm going to see the before, during, and after pattern and everything. So the logic of all this is just a few lists, and if you start getting them, which you'll notice what Martin, everybody says Martin does, he just looks for what you're not accounting for.
Okay.
And he tells you forgot this. Now, I think that's the secret to why he has it sounds like he has good manners. Right? He
acts like he has good manners.
Well, he doesn't, but he acts like it. And me, I'm like accusing the person of dishonesty because they haven't done their due diligence, yet they're making an assertion with absolute conviction. And I'm like, how can you say you have this? How can you say that with conviction when you violated all these crimes? When of course, what I'm trying to do is get across that broader idea, right? I'm trying to get the concepts across. Martin's just trying to help you on your journey, right? And so this is one of the disconnects we have in the team, is that they don't like it when I go prosecutor rather than advisor, right? And I believe, and Eli and I like to go prosecutor, and he likes to go to the processor, the
executioner,
the prosecutor who's got an axe, who's wearing the hood and laughing at you because
that guy,
So they don't like the prosecutorial so much, but I'm trying to get the bigger idea across, which is that it's just a set of checklists. Well, what does the law need to provide decidability? It needs checklists.
Right.
And, we're like, well, dear Mr. Liberal, as long as it's not a violation of any of these things, it doesn't matter, whatever you want, fine. But these are the limits. The problem is stealing shit from people by using words is the cheapest way to steal shit.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's what they specialize in. They specialize in seduction and guilt. And so what they're trying to do is get stuff for free by using words. Words that have force you to pay a cost of social friction if you don't obey them in allowing them to steal. That's what a liberal's doing.
Yes.
Now, the problem I'm trying to figure out, and I haven't quite got there yet, because I've just got there with women, but I haven't got there with men yet, which is, why are we vulnerable to this in women? In other words, we seem to be extremely, everybody panders to females. We know that, male and women pander to females. But why are men so tolerant of women's bullshit? I don't really understand why we're so tolerant of it. I think it's because it's so unavoidably costly, right? That we can usually ignore it and leave it to the women to play their stupid fucking, what is that? Housewives, housewives, the rich and famous type of, I mean, that's what women are really like. I mean, that's just, they're exaggerated, but I mean, that's what's really going on with women, is all that vicious nonsense between them, all that status game playing and undermining and digging and, false complimenting and all this other shit, right? And men were like, just take your shit and go there and fucking henpeck each other, fine, but keep us out of it. The problem is, once they bring that into politics, it poisons the fucking well, just like it poisons the business environment, just like it poisons the military environment.
So did you see this? There was a suggestion. You were in the conversation. It was Max Danger said he suggested that we identify as lesbian women, all men identify as lesbian women for the purposes of winning the game. I'm like, that has its own internally consistent logic. He's like, Eli didn't like it, but it's like, it makes sense.
I identify as a woman. If all the men identify as a woman, don't insult me.
Lesbian woman.
Anyway, no, I of course, I find that stuff humorous and witty, but the only way, it's like we're always avoiding the real cost. Is that the real cost is physical action is costly. It's just fast. And so we can pay fast physical action or slow.
Sorry, how do you want the Band-Aid to be torn off, right?
Yeah, you just tear up the Band-Aid and you say, okay, well, here's the deal. That's that kind of bullying you women do with undermining, right? That's your kind of violence, right? You're bullying and social, and so you're hurting me through this. I agree not to pound the shit out of you, right? Whenever I think you're misbehaving. If you agree not to use female warfare against men.
So then you're in this pattern of thinking, then you're suggesting that the liberals are right again. That's 2 times in one sitting, which is this: the words are violence.
Well, I mean, no, words are. It's not that the words are violence is meant to suppress truth.
Well,
right?
no, we're saying that the words are indeed violence because they are suppressing truth. They're violence to the commons of truth.
Okay, fine. It's just abusing, harm, and violence.
Okay, well, right? That's good.
Right.
Let's talk about that. That's a distinction that I like. Harm,
right. So it's violence. Verbal harm, and verbal harm
is not violence.
Is not violence.
Okay.
But so again, I don't want to fall in the trap of appropriating words in order to construct a conflationary lie. So I'm going to disambiguate physical.
You don't want to agree with the liberals.
Physical harm from
right. So we differentiate violence from harm.
Yeah.
So it's harm that we're talking about. So the words are harmful, just as the violence is harmful.
Correct.
but in a different way.
Well, I
So
mean,
we're in agreement.
it,
We're just
like,
partial terms.
here's how some very insightful evolutionary biologists will describe it. The sperm has the speed and the egg has the mass.
Right? That's wonderful. That's very wonderful.
So he says that general law just kept going. In other words, that original distribution kept going.
That's quite
So
interesting.
we're faster,
Yeah.
and the egg has the mass, which right, and
Okay.
they're more. So the problem you have is that violence is very fast and it's very effective. It's also very expensive. Mass is slower, right? It's slower, but it just takes longer to be effective. So essentially, the women are undermining, right, and men are limiting, and this conflict is going on. So we always talk about the good stuff like cooperation, but that's above the line in the top of the triangle. At the bottom, the other side of the triangle, where dissolution is
Destructive.
happening,
Yeah.
where re-ambiguation is going, where entropy is reoccurring. It's the conflict between violence and words. Now, over time, what's happened is males and females, males have protected their mothers and sisters and daughters, even though women haven't protected their brothers and cousins and uncles. All right. So what's happened though is that men kept this universe in check at the political level, while women kept everybody in check at the family and social level. But what's happened, of course, is that this false lie of equality has said that we're all equally capable of managing those limits, when what's really happened is we just said, hey, Pandora, here's the fucking box, here's the key, by the way, open it up and we'll just see what the fuck happens. And it happened, which is we let women's evil out of the box. And what we've discovered, which is quite to my disappointment, actually to my great disappointment,
Great dissatisfaction.
Oh, sorry?
Great dissatisfaction.
Is that women are way more evil than our ancestors said. They're way worse than the anti what do you call it? The women were trying to get through the whatever movement. What was the women's movement? The enfranchisement movement, suffragette movement. Is that what men said about women in the suffrage period was during the sort of late Victorian period, right? So we had our women at the highest level of respect ever during that period.
So we were suffering from a naive idealism.
A naive idealism, and what those men said was very naively. In other words, those criticisms were vastly understating the problem of women.
That's quite interesting.
And so what's happened is we've just, it's like, I hate to say this, but but Muslims are right about women. Islam is right about women. Fuck, it's so true. And so what did we get by adding women to the workforce? We destroyed our civilization. We destroyed our rate of reproduction. We destroyed truth. We destroyed the political system. And all we did instead of we rapidly increased consumption because women spend 70% of the income. So not only did we take and say, you're not going to save any money for retirement, right? And then borrow to lend to the next generation. What we're going to do is we're going to actually add women, and we're not going to produce children. And not only not going to save, not going to produce children, but we're going to burn our institutions of cooperation. So, I mean, the capital destruction by bringing women to the workforce and in the polity has been catastrophic. Now, if you brought women to the workforce, but not into the political system, that would have been fine. I think, right? But this whole thing of telling people that they've got to have statistics and that just doesn't work. That hasn't worked out at all, because it turns out women are incredibly destructive to organizations, at competitive organizations. Excuse me. They're wonderful for social organizations.
Oh, why?
I don't like it. I want to go. I said, you ever been to, where Hallstatt is? They talk about Hallstatt culture, which is where the Celtic civilization's core, I guess, was supposed to be. Well, if you go to that area, Hallstatt's on a lake, right, in Germany, and it's the mountains and pretty little architecture. And the first time I went there, I'm like, here's my passport, here's my, I forgot who I am, and I'm just going to stay here for the rest of my life. And we hired this wonderful little local German tour guide, because that's the way you take a tour, right? You hire a local guide, and you find one that is recommended by the equivalent of the Chamber of Commerce, the Tourist Bureau. And we would just ask for somebody who's a professor, right? And so we found this wonderful woman. You pay her like $300 for, a couple of days, whatever it is. And she took us to this one little lake and this little island out on it. And I'm like, why would you ever go anywhere? Right? And so I was thinking yesterday, I was like, I'm just going to go there. I'm going to find like a little, I'm going to work in like a coffee shop, like the little old man, and I'm going to get some little round glasses, and I'm going to make coffee for people and donuts, and I'm going to live the rest of my life happily in Prettyville with Germans. But some of this stuff you get, I mean, I'm really proud of this life's work we're doing here, right? But realistically, my inner person says, run like hell, go find somewhere nice.
This is not a happy place, man. It's like, there's a reason that you're doing all this work, and it's not because you're comfortable with what's going on. It's like, it's funny because it goes back to the question, how did you decide to do this? It's like no sane person would. I can see it as we discuss the matter and prepare the materials. It occurs to me how you're like this. You're like, shit, now I got to solve this problem.
Yeah. It's actually been like that. That's a really great thing you got, because it's like that, right? It's like you peel a layer off the shit. You peel a layer off the onion, you're like, oh fuck. And then you solve that problem. You peel that layer off, oh fuck. You peel that layer. Oh
right?
Fuck.
And you wonder why it's making you cry. It's just irritating.
And then you solve truth, and you're like, fuck, because reciprocity didn't take me long. Solve truth, I was really happy with. When I got through the truth thing, I was like, wow, I was pretty proud of myself. When I did the grammars, I was like, wow, I'm proud of myself right now. I'm pretty proud of myself. So you get some of those moments, and then you're like, wow, I'm pretty proud of myself. And it's like, look at this nice Lego sculpture I've made, everybody. And like, what the fuck are you talking about? It looks like Legos, right? I mean,
right? That's me stumbling into this mess. And I'm like, Kurt, we got to organize this, man. It's beautiful. I can see the beauty of it. It just needs to completion.
Well, you succeeded in your mission. It's pretty organized now. I mean,
we're not done.
No, but I mean, come on. I mean, look at the effect you had in 9 months. I mean, fuck. I mean, you made a baby.
Maybe.
Oh, come on. I was trying to that was supposed to get a laugh out of you.
I know.
I got nothing. I got maybe out of you.
I already thought of that one.
You did?
It's like I'm some kind of midwife or something, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I was thinking when I was talking to JF the other day, is that it really is so much easier to talk about now. When I was trying to start with logic, it was like, it was so hard. And then, you say, what's continuous recursive disambiguation, right? It's evolution, right? And you start with the physical stuff, and then you make it into language, and somebody sees the pattern.
Right.
And so you can explain, so if you want to, then you say, well, how would you make a logic of everything? Well, you'd have to know the first principle. What?
Audacious claim.
Right, you'd have to know you just tell them what you need, right? You need a paradigm consisting of the first principle and everything constructed from first principles from there. You need a vocabulary for that, a grammar of expressing it, right? And so you have the paradigm, the first principles, vocabulary and the grammar, and together that produces the logic. Well, well, so the first principle contains the logic. So you say, well, once you have that, then it's it. So, well, evolution works by continuous recursive disambiguation of stuff into mass of higher and higher combinations. Well, what do? We do continuous recursive disambiguation back to first principles. And we end up with the most parsimonious. And if you've found the first principle, a first principle means it's irreducible. You end up with the Lego system of the universe. So we did that, right? And it turns out that we come up with how to make it a picture book with triangles,
Right.
right? And so we've like, okay, well, and then Max and Nick Land and Butch Leghorn or whatever his name is went off and produced this whole freaking litany of triangles, so that, which I've got to,
they have a plethora of
I mean, it's
triangles.
freaking insane how many things they've drawn. I got to do some massaging to it, but apparently I've asked them and they don't care. So you look at these things, and now we've got a picture book. We've got the pictures, we got the logic, right? And I say, well, so what is, now that you've got this logic, what does it tell you? Well, it helps you explain, well, why did Europeans, despite being on the edge of the Bronze Age, evolve the fastest of all other peoples? And then you go, so, okay, well, let's continuously disambiguate all this thing we call Western civilization down to its first principle, and you turned out it's self-determination, right? What's the difference between self-determination and fucking evolution? There isn't any. It's the maximum means of computation, right? So you just look at these things, you realize, well, the civilizations vary by their variation from natural law, from the four
Right.
laws of the universe.
We look at self-determination as I'm using my own calculator.
What it really means is you're distributing calculation as far as you can.
Right.
In other words,
But it's like this. So if you look at other civilizations, what they do is suppress the calculation of many members,
correct.
which is like, it has an overall dampening effect on their capacity to calculate in toto.
Right. And so what they're trying to do largely is they're trying to do what the left is trying to do here, which is they're trying to produce an elite that does a little bit of calculation, but that calculation is stagnating, in other words, maximizing their rents in exchange for keeping these people ignorant and dependent. And so what happens in every other civilization other than ours is that they solve for, think of it as harmony or non-conflict. Well, of course you want to solve for non-conflict. We're the people who made conflict heroic. I mean, look at Americans. I mean, the rest of the world thinks we're fucking nuts. But if it's like, if you haven't, it's like, if you fail in business in America, well, God damn it, you tried. Great job, buddy.
Get a slap on the back, man.
You get a slap on the back. It's like, well, there's no, and if you win, holy shit, great job.
Right.
We lionize this whole evolutionary computation. I mean, you're not supposed to, everybody else gets it. So they're trying to compete for scholars, right? Or thinkers. Well, we're trying to compete for engineers and thinkers and scientists and scholars, whatever. But what do other civilizations do with these thinkers? They make sure they don't get too haughty. Whereas we're like, throw them out in front. Why? Because my monarchy versus your monarchy over there in the next fucking region, I got a better smart guy than you did.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's the value of this federated concept, right? Is because what you're trying to do is what you're trying to do is these guys are competing for the production of people who innovate. And that became really, I love it in Vienna. My favorite is the Vienna, the Habsburgs, because of how they were doing it. It was fucking hysterical. I mean, that's why so much great shit came out of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So those people turned finding somebody who could play the harpsichord better into a goddamn art form, right? I mean, we think we're doing the same today, but we're not, because we're not. Back then they were trying to develop excellence. We're trying to distribute redistribute research income to and all these fucking people, including the enemy that's destroying us from within. Whereas the aristocracy would say, how is that increasing my status? Turns out to be a really good thing, right? To have somebody in the aristocracy saying that. How does that increase my status? Turns out to be really good, because that means it's, why? Because it's a competitive advantage. If it's not a competitive advantage, then it's not worthy of
Right.
investment. And what's a destructive advantage? Woke, PC, grievance studies. What's basically the culture of critique. Anyway, what else you got on your list today? Anything else?
I did have one other thought. I got to make this note here. I was pondering stable relations between stable equilibria within a conformational field, which is like the universe is forced to seek conformity, and fitness being the level of conformity. So fully conformational will be absolutely fit. Less conformational will be less fit. And what that means,
I don't know what conformational means. That's where I'm losing you.
conformational field is the pressure of the universe to cause the being to conform. The pressures of the universe. I don't know. I don't have a better name for it. I'm trying to come up with a name.
Stable relation. Persistence.
Well, but it's like a persistence. You can be unstable and persist to the terminus as the being. And it's like, the issue is this: the conformational field is seeking, or the being is seeking fitness within this field, but it's like the level, the degree of not fitness generates a static charge within the stable relations that is destructive. That's
okay. The reason I'm having trouble following is because the premise of the triangle is it doesn't require knowledge in order to create a triangle. To create any other geometry requires knowledge. It requires intention. So when you say conformative, what I'm hearing is intent or design, when in fact it's just a stable relation. In other words, it's something discovered, discovered by trial and error or by accident.
right.
So what's happening, literally happening, is there's always a pressure on the universe to devolve, right? To cool.
Yes. So like entropic.
Correct. Entropy is always present. The thing about a stable relationship or sufficient quanta, accumulation of sufficient quanta, which is stepwise of volumes of energy, is that the pressure of the background is only varies slightly, right? In other words, while you can actually accumulate enough energy to make a wave and a particle, right, under right circumstances, the 0 point or the quantum background doesn't on its own produce very many concentrations of force, of energy. In other words, it doesn't produce many surviving quanta. And so the more energy you have, the less influence this thing, the background, can have on you. In other words, the more persistence you have, or negative entropy, versus the entropy that is being promoted in the background. This is why it takes a particle to wipe out a particle. Does it make sense? Or a wave to wipe out a wave. Wave technically being a protoparticle. Wave, protoparticle, particle,
Right.
Combination of particles, etc. So what happens though is that if you have some, like a given set of particles will form a set of orbitals, right? Right, and so the orbital is, think of it as a lightning storm.
Yeah.
a set of lightning storms that are rotating next to each other, and they're forced into some patterns because this background's always around it, right? It's always fighting the background. And so that's what they say an electron shield or field is, that this thing is providing amazing electrical charges all around. And so the way I say it, a particle is the point at which the maximum charge of the current electrical strike is present. But it's better to think of orbitals or elements and particles as bald lightning,
Yeah.
and so when it hits something, a particle hits something, the lightning strikes and the energy goes to there, right? So it's just a better way of thinking about it. So, but what happens is when these two, is that these orbitals are always threatened with lesser or more stability. So if I have my orbital and your orbital come together, we can increase each other's stability. In other words, the lightning will transfer between them.
Right.
And that's what forms these bonds, because
Right.
they don't want to give it up.
Right.
And so, and I'm trying to, it's like you go from there. The minute you start talking about positive, negative charges and, and current, right? I mean, you start getting to where you lose people. I try to keep stuff at the hydraulic level, I try to keep stuff at the mechanical level, but I mean, fundamentally, there's reasons why these positive, negative charges, and there's a couple of forces that are very important at the very low level, which is these variations in the quantum field that are in the background. They produce volumes. And so, like if you put two plates really close together, you can't form any big volumes in here. You can only form little ones. So the universe will push the two plates together, right? There's a couple of other forces that are like that. We tend to think of a particle as here. We're forgetting it. It's moving electromagnetically, moving everything around it, right? So, and we don't know the speed. We know the speed at which things move through the quantum background waves, which we call the speed of light. But we don't know the speed of electromagnetic movement through that quantum background. It could be infinite, who knows? And if I'm wrong, I would love some physicist who really actually knows what he's talking about to correct me. But as far as I know, we don't know that speed, right? So yes, I think that's correct. Anyway, so the problem you have is there's so much we have this idea of a particle being like a moon going around a planet.
Right.
And it's more like fucking utter chaos going on right there. And we symbolize these things into patterns so that we can talk about them mechanically, right? So there's a bunch of forces moving on a thing and so in simple terms, it's like this thing is outrunning the background.
Right.
Right. And so the problem is there's always the opportunity for decay, and most things will decay eventually.
That's right.
Anyway, I don't know how I got on that.
That's the last thing I was working on. I haven't completed that course, and I'm like, okay. And I'm operating at a biological level, not a subatomic.
Right. I mean,
quantum.
And this is the problem is, as they talk about the subatomic model, they say it's unintuitive. That's fucking bullshit. The reason they're saying that is because of a confluence of problems in physics. One is that they started out with this idea of the ether, luminous ether, and they disproved the ether. Well, they didn't really. They just discovered that what they thought with the ether, right? There's a quantum background there,
right?
And so there really is an ether. They just don't want to call it that, and they avoid this topic.
They don't want to backtrack.
Right. I mean, it's like that. The second thing is Einstein and Bohr created a cartoon, which we call special and general relativity, right? And the quantum physicists created a statistical model. So you have a statistical model in a cartoon. I mean, Einstein's stuff isn't right. We see how it's wrong. There's like 100 reasons it's wrong, right? But it's like Newton's gravity. It's like close enough. But I mean, space doesn't bend. Something happens to the quantum background that causes anything to go through it to bend, right? Space can't bend because it's a fucking measurement. Something in space bends, right? And so they're trying to play this math game of talking about everything like it's math, but math doesn't exist, right? Math is a description of something, but they don't want to talk about what they're describing. And this is because nobody wants to take the courage to state a theory. You can understand, these things aren't, unless it can be explained classically, in other words, operationally, it's not a theory. It's just math. And so this is the problem of mathiness in physics, right? And they're using math as if math exists, when math is a description of something exists. When realistically, it certainly looks like it's just the quantum background, and the quantum background is actually pretty easily, I mean, not easily, it's been modeled. We can visually model it. It makes perfect fucking sense. It looks a hell of a lot like boiling water, right? Much more complicated. And there's a lot more going on there. Be like mix oil and water and some other viscous, a bunch of substances of different viscosity. They're all boiling in there. But I mean, that's really about what you're ending up with, right? It's not unimaginable by the human mind. Well, once you see that and you think about, okay, how do I express like how that bubbles becomes persistent?
Right.
Right. Except the bubbles aren't like air bubbles. They're like balls of lightning. Well, okay, then the next person says, well, but what's making that quantum background bubbles? Well, it looks like we're looking at the quantum background. And you like take one Planck unit, right? Which is really fucking small, right? I mean, tiny. And in that thing, the amount of bubbles moving around is phenomenal, right? Well, what's making those bubbles? Well, it's just as ridiculous a scale downward. We don't know this, right? But it looks like it's just as ridiculous a scale downward from the Planck length size bubbles to whatever is going on down there, as it is from the Planck length up to what we perceive as matter. Right? I mean, it's just, but it doesn't mean we can't describe it in classical terms. My view is that all they're trying to do is keep funding rolling in to this big jobs program they call physics, when the answer is that we should put a Millennium Prize out there of $10 million for whoever produces a consistent and correspondent theory using classical descriptions instead of woo-woo. Because we'd get one, because I know there's guys out there working. The problem is what they're trying to do is doing what Einstein did. Einstein fucked up, but he created a pattern that other people are trying to imitate. And so instead of going through where Hilbert and Tesla were doing, which was thinking about it operationally, Einstein created a mathy picture. So everybody in physics is doing string theory and all this more mathy picture stuff, but it's not operational. And when you do that, you've lost the information necessary to make the next level of deductions.
And it occurs to me that this is a form of rent seeking.
Yeah, it's a job program.
There's research I did on the great foundations stemming from the turn of the 20th century, the beginning of the 20th century, which is the intention was to gain control of the academic institutions.
Yep.
And through the use of grants. And I think that the culmination of it is this COVID thing, which has demonstrated the capture of the medical regulatory institutions for purposes of political control. And it's like, it has another function other than what it appears to the public to be. That's all I'm saying.
Well, what's a priest? A rent seeker.
I'm going to teach you some Hebrew now. As I turn you into the host, make you the host, and then I will tell you the secret that I looked this up.
What's a woman? A rent seeker.
I know, but here's the key.
Can you get your wife in here so I can talk to her?
I won't let you meet her. She's more hard-headed than you can tolerate.
I just
hard-headed.
We just need a sample woman to come in and have this discussion with.
Oh my.
So why don't you just bring her in and we'll have a talk with her.
Oh my.
And we'll see whether you sleep on the couch.
The house burn. Okay, so this word in Hebrew, this is the phone name. It sounds like this. Cover means priest. It also means loophole. There you have it. And in my mind,
isn't etymology a wonderful discipline?
It is. It's just fantastic. So it's like this. It translates to me. Cover is the camouflage of the snake, seeking to take advantage of its prey. There you have it.
Well, but women have to seduce children with love, right, and care. They have to, right? And so you can't. So the animal has to fulfill its function. The problem is, the dog wants to scratch its ass on the fucking carpet. You don't let it do that. It's disgusting, right?
We don't like it.
Same fucking problem. I don't want to just equate women's emotions with a dog scratching its ass on the carpet. It's the same problem. You see, you didn't see that coming. I thought that was obvious. I thought you were going to stop me right away. I thought I'd never get the first phrase out of my mouth.
That one caught me off guard. I was pondering the distinction between. I want to do the etymology of seduction and induction and compare them, and I was distracted by that when the car hit me, T-boned me. Wow.
Can I say this? We have a bunch of women in the movement who I love deeply, and there's one of them who I won't mention, and she's a writer, right? She's a writer, and I just think this woman is fantastic. And so whenever I say stuff like that, I have this, I have like the good and the evil, but somewhere behind me is her, right? Because I imagine her, right? Because I've actually met her in person now, so but I have this woman in back of me who's rational, competent, she's what you want in a woman, and I feel like I'm criticizing her, right? And of course I'm not, because she's not that kind of person. And I'm not criticizing my ex-wife, right? Because she's not that person. But so I have these little voices in my head saying, don't do that. But I mean, when we're talking about the very mass distribution of people, I mean, in general, the rule applies. So, I mean, it really bothers me that, there's really awesome women out there. And if you score one of them, if you can score a conservative woman, you've like won the fucking lottery, right? Because the rest of them are fucking crazy, right? I mean,
the issue is my understanding is they can be cured if they have more than 4 children.
It's true, because you can't afford to be crazy anymore. How many kids you got?
3. That was an admission of guilt. I failed.
I got 3, but I did it with 3 different women. What does that mean?
No, it doesn't count, man. Doesn't count. You still failed either way. There's just no victory there, man. You're not solving the problem. It's all good.
I gotta go hang myself.
No, absolutely not. Now you're
right.
Honest. So we're now prepared for serious work.
I gotta wipe the tears of laughter out of my eyes.
Right?
All right. Okay, so I gotta catch the audience back. Am I sharing my screen?
Yes. Not yet.
No, I'm gonna try. It's really hard to how does that work? Interesting. There's new features here.
There we go.
I assume you're seeing durable, perishable.
That's right.
Okay. I have this new thing, which I've plugged in, which transcribes for us. Did you hear me?
Yes.
I want to test it in another.
Oh, Oh, I
another
like it.
form, and if it works as well as it did in my last test, that means that we can transcribe some of these things.
Hmm.
All right, so I'm trying to make sure I have an adult workspace here. All right, Dr. Brad. I see the guys have taken up joy at teasing you.
I know.
They're having fun with you, man. It's a love thing. You
I
can
know.
tell.
Thank you, guys.
I'm trying to figure out how to start this here. Okay. So we started out, just to bring everybody up to speed.
Right.
When we started out, I had the choice of saying, well, where are we going to start this? Right? And because of where we were, I said, I'm not going to start with physics, which we just talked about, right? I mean, I'm not going to build up from physics. I said, let's start with what people care most about, which is natural law behavior. So let's do the law and educate people on the law. And like I went through these lists, like, an hour ago. I walked through the reciprocity, truth, demonstrated interest, etc. list, right? And say, well, they're just checklists because if you can test something operationally, then it's a survival. So I said I'll start out with it. So I started out with the initial problem of time and acquisition and the different economies that affect it. I talked about cooperation, the ternary law of cooperation, right? I talked about the 5 laws of decidability, ethics of cooperation. That in there, and that's like personal philosophy, ethics, politics, group strategy, and limits. Talked about the limits to it. I then went into reciprocity in general. I didn't go into truth because I thought it was going to be too much of a digression, and I talk about it all the time by going through it. So I skipped over truth. I went into the law of demonstrated interests, which are existential, right? Obtained and common, right? And then I talked about how these demonstrated interests evolve from natural to demonstrated to institutional, and then how we created terms for defense of these demonstrated interests: possession, property rights. And then I tried to define what a right was between existential right, between wanted or needed rights, which are natural or desired, the ones we actually bring into being as existential, and then the privileges we try to create in addition to rights. There is a bit of a dispute out there over whether all rights are privileges, but I'm going to disambiguate a right, which is a via negativa, from a privileges, which is via positiva.
I want to touch on that for a second. These existential rights appear to me to be consensual commons for cooperative purposes.
I don't know what consensual common means. Theoretically, technically, an existential right is a negative right. It's something. It doesn't demand anything from others except what you can equally not do, right? And then, in order to produce those rights institutionally, we have to create particular processes institutions. So usually we talk about this as via negativa and via positiva.
I see.
Right. And these are like
these look like commons to me, though.
This is freedom. Oh yeah, it is. Freedom from, freedom to, no, excuse me, I don't want to go there. So it's positive. This is basically negative freedom. and positive freedom. These are in how that's talked about in the vernacular. I hate these words, so I don't use them.
I see.
And then please go down your little thought, their comments, so I can.
'Cause it's like this, it's like, some societies may not fully express these existential rights the same way as others. Is my point.
Yes.
And that's why I say it's commons, and it's like they're assets for the polity that are generated by the will of the polity to varying degrees, and they're not all the same.
Yeah, let's talk about that. That's a great subject, and I don't think we put it in here. What we didn't cover was, so we covered what people demonstrate an interest in, right?
Mm-hmm.
We covered these topics, but we didn't talk about, when we talked about this evolution of these interests, but we didn't talk about the atomization of control. So what happens in primitive civilizations is that who depends on this asset for survival, right? So you might always have personal, right, and family items, but they're going to be trivial, and they're not universal. If it turns, in some primitive societies, if somebody needs something and you have it, it'll be redistributed to them, right? So and you're expected to do that, to take care. But so what happens is we move from the tribe to the family to the individual. So, for example, it was very. This is especially land, right? Let's use land as an example, right? So in most tribal arrangements, the land is shared, right? Territory is shared. When we get into agrarianism, land is allocated to the family, and it's only late, or fairly recently, that land has developed the individual. So even in I think as late as the 1600s, the law didn't allow you to sell the land, sell your home or your land or your livestock at the expense of your family, right? So this is the what we of monopoly of. Right, and so this progress, this evolution, happened this way, and so if you go into some tribes, everybody builds a house for you, and the tribe builds a house, but it's considered the tribe's house, but you're using it. So does this make sense? Do I have to repeat this any longer, or don't know if I made it? Okay, so. Getting back to your question, how did you say it?
It's commons.
Is that this is the true for commons? Is it who is the target? right? So is it
Wow.
the tribe, the clan, the extended family, the family, and nuclear, and the individual. All right.
Hmm.
And so what we find is that the target commons production is one of the above. So morals, so norms, traditions, norms, which includes moral ethics, manners, ethics, morals, laws, traditions are dependent upon the degree of the state of development. Right? Because the state of development determines the organization, the atomization or property, right? So this is why when people say moral relativism,
Yes.
so when people say it isn't that it's not that morals are relative. It's not that reciprocity isn't universal or that morals are relative. Morality is relative. It's that the conditions for moral rules vary by the degree of development, which usually means the degree of trust, cooperation, and trust. Right? Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
So that was a great question you brought up.
Thank you.
I feel like I didn't do something that I feel like I failed to
No,
get it.
you did a good job.
So this is an important point, is that people conflate morality, reciprocity, with moral rules, right? Morals, right? Because morality is universal, it's reciprocity. But what consists of reciprocity when if I sell off the fucking land and the animals and a house and take the money and you guys are homeless? That's not reciprocity.
Right.
Right. And it's not reciprocity because we created a network of cooperation that we were all dependent upon. So what the left tries to do is say, yeah, but we've created you're part of my group and you're part of my family and you're part of my tribe. No, we go back to this top here, which says, what's the second question of philosophy? Why don't I kill you and take your stuff? Why don't I and mine kill you and take your stuff? So they say we're a community, we're a polity, we're a people. No, we're a collection of either individuals or families or clans or tribes. And there's and the limit and reciprocity goes within the limits of proportionality. So if it's disproportionate, meaning it's now irreciprocal, then we defect. So, the left is saying you can't defect because you're my child or my parent or my family member. Fuck no, I can defect. Matter of fact, that's the whole point of secession is defection.
I'm just pointing at the Windsor Bridge right now.
Windsor Bridge
is
Canada.
occupied by truckers.
Yes.
Because they failed that you failed the reciprocity with them. The government of Canada has failed reciprocity with their truckers, and now they are defecting.
Right. And so this is what I say. I have this beautiful little piece I wrote is that I, mine, and my ancestors don't owe you a fucking thing. A matter of fact, what I want to know today is, and what Albert on the right wants to know today is, and what they don't want to say is, go back to here. Why don't I and mine kill you and take your stuff?
That seems to be the questions the Bolsheviks asked of the kulaks.
Right. And it's also why what we're asking of the left is that it's no longer reciprocal whenever it's disproportionate. Now you think inequalities, but you made that inequality by importing the unequal. And then you said you tried to accelerate equality instead of mature it. So you move people from the South to northern cities, destroying those cities quite on purpose, really, instead of letting them continue to mature into equals. I mean, you talk about slavery. Well, of course, you created a 500,000 dead in a bloody civil war when the answer was slavery was going to go out in 30 years anyway. So now what they pull in is, but think of the children.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I'm like, I am thinking of the children. I'm thinking of all the children that weren't born from the 500,000 dead. And I'm thinking of all the children of mothers and fathers who are dead. You know, they're all, when we get to it, liberal means child. Anyway.
Sorry for the tour there.
Okay, I need to put this in context. Evolution of controlled decidability over.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, here we go.
All right, so we covered, right, this is where we left off, right?
Yes.
So the via negativa rights, which are really all natural rights, free from the involuntary, you're free of the involuntary imposition of costs against your demonstrated interest by others. All right, that's what you're trying to achieve. And after that, we try to seek privileges, which is we're trying to produce commons. Now there's good privileges and there's bad privileges. Now I try to go into what knowledge do I use in reconciling. In other words, now we have to get to the problem decidability. I indent this thing every time I edit this. I have no idea why it doesn't stay indented.
With you.
And then we talk about what causes these disputes and how, so we want to talk about integral suppression of violation of demonstrated interest.
Right.
Right. And so we talked about how we move up the scale from the very obvious, like violence and murder, all the way up into immigration and overbreeding. And then we said, okay, well then how do we handle all these issues? And we talked about the three methods of coercion, the three institutions by which we coerce people. We talked about that they're always trifunctional. We're talking about the problem, the innate conflict between human behavior and these trifunctional institutions, that all three forces are trying to get a monopoly on decidability, but they're trying to create, quote, laws. So then it says, okay, well, if we want a law that isn't abusive, what does that look like? Let's disambiguate the term. So we went through the etymology of the law. And then we went into the evolution of the term law, which is the laws of the universe, the law of agreement, which is what we call natural law, privileges or rights for law, justifications and commands. And so we separated those into before, during, and after. Then we talked a little about the scope of the laws, what made a law legitimate, what was the difference between legality and legitimacy. We talked about moral legitimacy, then what makes the content of the law legitimate in its construction. And then we specifically got into all these properties of law, which I thought was going to be boring, but apparently people really liked it.
Mhm.
And so we ended up, that was where we ended up. One of the comments I wanted to make was that there's no difference between the evolution of the science of law. Because it's the same thing as all epistemology. We just mature it through trial and error. So the next thing we were going to bring about was, didn't I do this already? Is it legitimate law? Okay. Is that I was going to say, well, so now that we have all the properties, right, we know what a law is, we know the properties. What does a law look like? I think I have to move this bar down here. And so we've just gone through all the acts will conform to the following. And this is the form of construction. Blah, 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 blah,
Right.
blah, 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 where am I? Right. So we, who, on behalf of whom, before the court of, with these definitions, I'm going to make some, I call that out there, with these references, whereas we have observed in this grammatical construction, and whereas we desire, right, effects, therefore we propose a series of actions and changes of state such that we produce an outcome, and we argue in our defense how it doesn't violate the law, right? Where our argument depends upon prior acts and laws, and our success and failure is measured by, and be reversed by, and otherwise shall expire by. We there warranty this, right, argument by, signed, juried, adjudicated, assented, reported. Now, if you've answered all of these questions,
Mhm.
if you've done that, these are properties in this structure. That's what a law should look like. Now, does that make sense? I'm watching your face and I'm not getting my I understand face. You're muted. You're muted. You know, the fact that I can talk and you can't is somewhat charming to me because I have this incredible advantage. You know, I can tell you what, why don't we save this and we'll reconnect. Wait a minute, have I accidentally muted you? Let's make sure I haven't accidentally muted you. Bradley Worrell, mute, ask to unmute. It says unmute. It says you're muted. All right. You want to disconnect and come back? All right, so I'm going to stop the share.